Welcome. Hello, everyone. We are here today talking about faith and how that can be a protective factor for suicide. And so I'm so excited to introduce to you Pastor Toby Oakes. And I'm going to let Pastor Toby tell you a little bit about himself. And then Carla Bidlack, who is one of our coalition members on our Stark County Suicide Prevention Coalition. And I am Elena Aslanides Candace with Stark County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery, and I chair the Stark County Suicide Prevention Coalition. So thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this important topic. It's not something that I feel like we talk about enough, so I'm really grateful to you to be here and to join us. So just go ahead if you want to introduce yourself, Pastor Toby. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so as Elena was saying, my name is Toby Oakes. My family and I actually hail from Texas. About 2 years ago, I'll confess, I didn't even know where Ohio was. And so we've been all over the world, but never to Ohio. And now we live here. We love it in Ohio. And I have the great privilege to be a pastor over at Stanwood Community Church in Navarre. So we're still adjusting, but we love it here.
Awesome. And so we got connected because of Carla. So Carla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Elena. My name's Carla Bidlack, as Elena shared, and I have the privilege of serving on the Suicide Prevention Coalition with Elena and just many others that just share a real desire to prevent suicide and to make mental health a conversation that we can destigmatize. And so I feel very privileged to be part of this. And I got connected through my work, and I work for the Stark County Educational Service Center, and I work for the Care Team Initiative. And under that umbrella of Care Team, we have a family support specialist team of folks that serve in our public school districts across Stark County and a little bit beyond those borders. But I am the family support specialist training coordinator. And then I also get to be part of the Suicide Prevention Coalition and am a steering committee member, and also am part of the education committee.
So as a part of your actually co-chair of that education committee, Carla has always been so wonderful at just making connections and really spreading information around QPR, which is what we wanted to talk about today. So I believe that Carla is how initially the QPR conversation had come up, and that as an opportunity. So prior to hearing about QPR, and the course, have you had any experience with suicide, Pastor Toby?
Yes, I have, and unfortunately, and I think probably as many of us have in different capacities. My years back, a first cousin of mine took his own life. And then as we're talking about faith in that component, I've been in ministry for over 30 years. And as a student, as a college student involved with campus ministry, one of the students that was on the peripheral became really ill and ended up taking his own life. And then in the midst of 9/11, when we were overseas, one of the people that was instrumental in helping us and our missionary team ended up having, had some issues, bipolar, different things that he was dealing with. He ended up taking his life. And then when we arrived here in Ohio last December, one of our neighbors took their life as well. So it's just been from personal acquaintances, family, to people that even in ministry, we have seen it.
Lots of touch points. I'm sorry to hear that. And I tell people that knowing the number of people that died by suicide, the chances are that we're all at some point going to be impacted in whatever circle that finds us. So this might be a little bit obvious, knowing that you have been touched by suicide in many different ways, but what made you decide to take a QPR course?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we just moved from Texas. Actually, we moved up in the end of May of 2021 to serve here. And at that time, Carla, who is also a member of our church, had reached out to our elders about offering a QPR. So one of the elders was telling me about it. It sounded really, really interesting in light of, again, the experience that I've had in the ministry, but I couldn't be here because I was still moving from Texas. And so when the opportunity came about a year later to offer it, we were all definitely on board. And so we brought QPR back into our church and had our leadership go through that program, some people for the second time.
That's great. So for those of you that are wondering what QPR is, I feel like for some of us this is like second nature, but it is it's a suicide prevention gatekeeper training that usually takes anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. And it really teaches you about the warning signs for suicide, how to ask somebody directly if they're having thoughts of suicide, and then how to instill hope and then refer them for support as well. So having taken that QPR course, I'm wondering what your thoughts were on that course and if there was any value to taking that.
There absolutely was, and I'm so grateful again for Carla for bringing that, and hopefully that will become more a regular rhythm for our church, not just our leadership, but also our members. You know, the lay folks that are just a part of our congregation and community. I would say a couple of things, Elena. So before coming here, I was also a school administrator in Texas. And one of the most valuable resources I ever received was CPR. And it's the feeling of helplessness is someone who is concerned for the well-being of others. When someone is choking or out of breath, to think, I feel helpless, I don't know what to do. And to have the equipping of a CPR class was so helpful and encouraging to know that we're not helpless. We have something to offer in a situation, an emergency intervention. Similarly, I see the exact same thing with QPR. And in fact, in the question, persuade, refer class that we went through, they talked about that analogy, that QPR is something not just for professionals like you guys or for pastors like me, but for lay people, normal people interacting with normal people who are hurting, to be able to implement. I believe as a person of faith, as a pastor, that ultimately the deepest issues in life, the deepest solutions can be met in a relationship with Christ and the church. But even with that, I see QPR complementing that in the same way I would with CPR. For example, if I go to a restaurant and someone is choking, my first thought is, what am I going to do to help unlodge the thing that is threatening their life? I think QPR provides similar tools. In this crisis situation, what intervention needs to happen before anything else can happen? And this process has really helped with that. I'll say this too, on a very practical level. I know I've shared with you guys previously, literally within days of going through the training. I think, Carla, we did it on a Saturday. Within a couple of days, I had a conversation with an acquaintance that was really, really struggling. And we were able to begin to implement some of the things with the question, persuade, refer talked about. And I even told them, you know, I just went through a training for this. You know, this is common. Don't want you to feel bad. This is stuff that happens in the world. I see it as a pastor, you know, that we care for you, we love you, and here's a resource for you. And so that is something now. This acquaintance is more of a friend of our family, and we know that there is that resource for them.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. The timing.
Yes.
Timing is amazing. Yeah. So what do you feel was that most important takeaway from QPR?
I would say really three things have really stood out to me. And the one I shared previously, just with knowing at least what to do in that situation when someone talks about self-harm or someone is showing those signs, to not feel like I need to run away, which is funny as a pastor, I wouldn't typically do that. But when we get in situations we're not equipped for, can be paralyzing. I feel more empowered and equipped on how to handle that situation. I would say the second thing, the second important takeaway that I take from this is I see the complementary nature as a person of faith, as a pastor. I am always seeking to develop people, to help people in their relationship with God. And I realize that this intervention actually is absolutely essential because, for them to grow in that relationship, they need to be around to experience that. And so I see that. And then I think the last thing, and I made allusion to this as well, that this is not just something for pastors and professionals, but it's for normal people. Because there's people that are even listening to this today that have friends who may not feel comfortable talking to a pastor like me or a professional like you at this moment, but they will talk to a neighbor or a friend. And that neighbor needs to know where to go to get help. And I think that's the beauty of QPR and why we need to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible.
Yeah. I agree 100% that suicide prevention happens in everyday conversations with ordinary people, not always in a counselor's office. And I'm a firm believer that likely by you taking this course, it sounds like you probably are changing the way that you talk about suicide, which will help people feel more open to talking about it, which is ultimately the goal. And so I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I would say too, this is a definitely a work in process. I was having a conversation the other day with someone about something, and I realized, oh, that's how I used to think about this issue. But I realize it's changing, and part of that is because, frankly, of this training that we had. So it's definitely a work in process, which is all the more the reason why, I didn't take CPR once and put it away, but I would take CPR as many times as I could, and I want to do the same. Anytime we do QPR, I want to be there, just to be reminded of these principles and to be ready.
I am just so grateful to you, Carla, as well, for making that connection and you understanding how important this work is. And this isn't just a part of your job. I feel like since I've met you, that's always been the case, is that you're always, you believe to the core the importance about talking about mental health. And so just making these connections and sharing that in your personal life about, hey, I think this is really helpful and you don't have to struggle. So I just want to say thank you to you as well, Carla, for making that connection.
Oh, thank you, Elena. I really am enjoying just this conversation. It's so encouraging because I really believe that, I'm not a counselor, but I feel like attending QPR, and I've attended 5 QPRs, and I still keep going because every time I go, I do learn something new, because everyone that's at the table has a unique perspective that they have the opportunity to ask questions at the end, and those conversations that happen after the QPR training. There's something freeing, I think, for individuals to be able to talk openly with others that attended, to talk about maybe some of the things that's been difficult for them. Maybe they don't know how to approach suicide, and this gives us such practical tips when we do have a concern that someone may be suicidal. They may be having those thoughts of suicide. Very practical approaches that we can take. And we have the opportunity to step in we don't have to have all the solutions. We're not the experts, but we can step in a moment where someone is really hurting, and then we can call in those additional resources, and we can really approach that person to empower them with some really specific things that can help them. And we're very blessed in Stark County to have some great resources that can do that as well.
I think, I don't know that we've mentioned that piece of it, is that by taking a QPR course, I mean, you're not expected to be like a junior therapist by any means, but I hope that people leave there as well feeling that sense of there is no right words. There's no, specific thing that you can say, more so than just being there with the person, showing that you're not afraid to talk about that they can talk about it with you if they are struggling, because sometimes just listening really does go a long way. But then knowing how to ask those questions about, are you having thoughts of suicide? And like you said, Carla, just knowing, because chances are at some point we will come across somebody that's struggling. And so where do we turn to for support? Even if we don't feel like we can ask that question, where are we helping that person get linked with? So that's a really good point. Really good point. Any final thoughts or things that you would like to share, either of you?
I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be here. And again, as I think as a pastor, as I think about the spiritual well-being of folks, this is just an important component in that. And I know that loving community is a really important part of this. But sometimes people need to know as well, in that moment of intervention, when they are thinking these thoughts, we need to have a way to step in immediately and help them. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this initiative in this video today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and you sharing your positive experiences with us.